I always believed that family was supposed to protect you, that no matter how bad life got, the people you loved would stand by your side. But I was wrong. So very wrong. My name is Sophia, and this is the story of how my father sold me to a millionaire. I grew up in a quiet town, the kind where everyone knew each other. Life wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable. We had a small house, my mother's warm meals, and laughter at the dinner table. I had dreams, big ones. I wanted to go to college, find a career I loved, and build my own life. But in a single moment, my world came crashing down. It started when my father's business collapsed. One day, he was making plans to expand his shop. The next, we were drowning in debt. Creditors came knocking. My mother's face was filled with worry. My father stopped sleeping. Our family, once strong, was crumbling. Then, one night, everything changed. "Sophia, we need to talk," my father said, his voice unusually serious. My mother sat beside him, her hands clenched together. Something felt wrong. "There's a man," my father continued, "a very wealthy man. He's willing to help us." I frowned. "Help us how?" A heavy silence filled the room before my mother whispered, "He wants to marry you." The words hit me like a slap. Marry me. I was barely 18. I had never even met this man. "No," I said firmly. "That's insane." My father sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sophia, listen. If you agree, he will pay off all our debts. This is our only chance. Their only chance. But what about me? Please," my mother begged, grabbing my hands. "If we don't do this, we lose everything." Tears filled my eyes. How could they do this to me? Days later, I was dressed in an elegant gown, forced into a car, and driven to a massive mansion. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, and then I saw him, Victor Hale, a wealthy, powerful man in his 40s. Cold, unreadable, dangerous. He looked me over, his lips curling into a smirk. "You'll do just fine," he said. I felt my skin crawl. I had been sold. The car ride to Victor Hale's mansion felt like a funeral procession. Silent, heavy, inescapable. My hands gripped the smooth fabric of my dress as I stared out the window. The city lights faded, replaced by towering iron gates that loomed ahead. The moment the gates opened, I knew. I wasn't arriving at a home. I was entering a prison. The car stopped, and the door swung open. I hesitated, but a firm hand pulled me forward. My heels clicked against the polished marble steps as I was led inside, and there he was, Victor Hale, a man of power, a man of wealth, a man who had bought me like property. His dark eyes scanned me, slow and deliberate. My skin prickled under his gaze. "You'll do just fine," he said, his lips curling into a smirk. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where would I go? My father had already made the deal. My mother had begged me to accept it. And now, I was alone. The next few days passed in a haze of silence and suffocation. The mansion was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings, gold chandeliers, rooms so large I felt like an ant inside them. But no matter how grand it was, it felt hollow, cold. I was given a room at the far end of the house. It was decorated beautifully, with a canopy bed and silk sheets. But the doors locked from the outside. I wasn't a guest. I was a possession. Victor rarely spoke to me, but his presence was constant. He watched me like a hunter studying prey, waiting for me to break. On the third night, I found him waiting for me in the grand dining room. A long table stretched between us, candlelight flickering off the fine china. He barely touched his food. Neither did I. Then he spoke. "You are my wife now, Sophia. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. The word wife made my stomach turn. I never agreed to this, I whispered, gripping my fork like a weapon. Victor smirked. You did when you stepped into this house. I clenched my fists. I wasn't his. I would never be his. But as I looked around the golden prison that now held me, one terrifying thought crept in. Maybe I had already lost. I woke up to silence, the kind that wasn't peaceful, but heavy, suffocating, the kind that made my skin prickle with unease. The golden prison I was trapped in felt colder with each passing day, its beauty nothing more than a cruel illusion. I barely slept anymore. Every sound, every flicker of movement in the shadows sent my heart racing. I wasn't safe here. I knew that much. It had been a week since I was brought to Victor Hale's mansion, and though he hadn't touched me, the weight of his presence was enough to make my stomach churn. He was always watching, studying, waiting. For what? I didn't know. But I refused to break. I had to hold on to the last piece of myself that hadn't yet been taken. On the 8th night, he summoned me to his study. The room smelled of leather and whiskey, the dim lighting casting shadows across the dark wooden shelves. He sat behind a mahogany desk, his fingers lazily swirling the amber liquid in his glass. He gestured toward the chair across from him, but I remained standing. My body was rigid, my hands clenched at my sides. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Sophia, he said, his voice calm, almost bored. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat. I am not your property. His lips twitched into a smirk, as if amused by my defiance. You misunderstand. I don't need you to love me. I just need you to obey. His words sent a shiver down my spine. My fists tightened. Why me? I asked, my voice steady despite the fear curling inside me. You could have anyone. Why buy a wife? Victor stood slowly, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the desk. Because I can. I took an instinctive step back, but he moved forward, closing the distance between us in an instant. His presence was suffocating, the air between us thick with something dark, something dangerous. You think you're different, he murmured. That you have a choice? I forced myself to meet his gaze. I will never be yours, he chuckled, the sound low and almost amused. We'll see. That night, I locked my door. It didn't matter. By morning, a key had been slipped underneath. A silent message. A warning. I stared at it, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. There was no mistaking what it meant. I wasn't in control here. I never had been. My only option was clear. I had to escape. And I had to do it soon. The key lay on the floor, gleaming under the soft morning light that filtered through the enormous windows. My breath was shallow, my heart hammering against my ribs. Victor had slipped it under the door deliberately. A reminder, a warning, a way of telling me that locked doors wouldn't keep him out forever. I refused to cry. Crying wouldn't save me. I had spent days trapped in this mansion, suffocating under his watchful gaze, waiting for the inevitable. But I wasn't going to wait anymore. I needed to get out, and I needed to do it before it was too late. At breakfast, Victor sat at the head of the long dining table, reading the morning paper like he was just another businessman starting his day, not the man who had bought me. His presence was composed, calculated. His control over everything, including me, was effortless. You barely eat, he observed without looking up. I forced myself to take a bite of toast, chewing slowly, my mind racing with possibilities. I couldn't afford to make a mistake. If I was going to escape, I had to be smart, careful. I'm not hungry, I said, keeping my voice steady. Victor folded his newspaper and placed it neatly beside his plate. You should take care of yourself, Sophia. You're no use to me if you waste away. A chill ran down my spine at the casual way he said it, like I was something to be maintained, a possession he didn't want broken. I swallowed my fear. I'd like to go outside, I said, carefully choosing my words. Just for some fresh air. His dark eyes met mine, studying me. I held my breath, waiting. He was testing me, trying to see if I was planning something. Finally, he gave a slight nod. Fine, but you won't go alone. Of course not. That afternoon, I was allowed into the gardens, accompanied by 2 guards who shadowed my every step. The estate was enormous, stretching beyond what I could see. High walls surrounded the property, reinforced gates keeping the outside world at bay. I walked along the trimmed hedges, my mind racing. There had to be a way out, a weakness in the security, a moment where I could slip away unnoticed. That was when I saw him, a man near the side entrance, loading boxes into a van. A worker, someone who had access beyond these walls. Hope flickered inside me. I had found my way out. Now, I just needed to take the risk before it was too late. The moment I saw the worker loading boxes into the van, I knew this was my chance. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm. If Victor or his guards suspected anything, I would lose my only opportunity to escape. For the next 2 days, I studied the routine of the estate. I watched the guards carefully, noting when they switched shifts, when they seemed the most distracted. I saw that the workers entered through the side gate every morning, unloading supplies before disappearing into the back of the mansion. They were barely acknowledged, barely checked. It was a risk, a terrifying, reckless risk, but I had no other choice. On the 3rd morning, I took my chance. I dressed in plain clothes, a simple sweater and jeans I had found in the back of my closet. No expensive gowns, no jewelry. I needed to blend in. I pulled my hair into a low ponytail, tucked my face down, and walked toward the workers' entrance with my heart hammering so hard I thought it would give me away. A worker, an older man, probably in his 50s, was moving crates onto a cart. I stepped closer, pretending to examine the boxes. He barely glanced at me. "Do you need help?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the fear curling inside me. He gave me a distracted nod, wiping sweat from his brow. "Yeah, sure. Grab that one over there." I lifted a small box and followed him toward the van. My body trembled with every step, but I kept moving. I could feel the guards watching from a distance, but they weren't paying close attention. To them, I was just another worker, another person moving crates like it was any other day. The moment we reached the back of the van, I acted. I ducked behind the open doors and crawled inside, squeezing into the shadows between the boxes. The old man didn't notice. He was too busy loading the next crate. Within seconds, the doors slammed shut. My breath hitched. I was inside. The engine roared to life, and the van began to move. I didn't dare breathe as the vehicle approached the gates. If they checked the van, it would be over. But then, I felt it. The slight dip of the road, the turn of the tires. We were outside. I had done it. I was free. Hours passed before the van finally stopped. When the doors opened, the worker let out a startled gasp. "Who the hell?" I scrambled out, hands raised. "Please," I gasped. "I need help." His expression softened when he saw the terror in my eyes. He hesitated, but then he nodded. "Come with me," he said. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was suffocating. I didn't feel like I was owned. I was Sophia again, and I would never let anyone take that away from me. Sophia's story is one of resilience, survival, and the fight for freedom. But what happens next? Will she truly escape Victor's grasp, or will he come searching for what he believes belongs to him? Do you want a sequel? Let me know if you'd like to see part 2. The hunt begins, where Sophia's battle for freedom is far from over. Comment your thoughts, share with others, and let me know if you'd like more.